Hello and welcome to the BCCC webinar, Biodiversity COP16 Highlights, Challenges and Opportunities, organized by the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce through its ESG and Sustainability Committee, chaired by Rafael Benck, Jamile Cruz, and Luciano Souza. I'm Cali Leopoldo, Business Development Officer at the BCCC. The BCCC is a coast-to-coast independent non-profit Canadian organization that has promoted business relations between Brazil and Canada for over 50 years by creating and maintaining high-level networking in our sectorial committees and events. At BCCC, we connect. I want to thank our annual sponsors, Vale, Melo Rock Logistics, Proactiva Results, BMA Law, and Brookfield, and all our members and partners for their continuous supports. We would like also to acknowledge that the land of Ontario, where we are, is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these lands. We also recognize the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Together, we stand as leaders, embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognizing that D&I is not just the right thing to do, but essential for our organization's success. We lead the change, understanding that diversity and inclusion practice must permeate all aspects of our business. By weaving D&I into the fabric of our organization, we cultivate an environment where every individual thrives and feels a sense of belongings. Innovation flourishes, and collective potential is realized. Let us forge ahead, united in our mission to create a diverse and inclusive future that transcends boundaries and elevates us all. Without further ado, we'd like to invite our excellent guests, Anki Manuela Salzman, Program Manager at Fundação Grupo Boticário de Proteção à Natureza, Regiane Borsato, Executive Director of Life Institute, Rodrigo Lima, Managing Director at Agroecony, and Dulce Benck, who will moderate our discussion, Head of Sustainability, Sustainable Finance at Proactiva Results. We are going to discuss on COP16, and I would like to thank everyone for accepting the invitation of attending this event. And Dulce, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalil. Thank you, BCCC, for the invitation to moderate this panel. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank to our panelists that are here with us today. Thank you for making yourself available 1 week and a half before Christmas for this discussion. So thank you very much. I must say when I heard about this webinar, I thought, wow, this is a great topic to discuss, and I'm very excited about our discussion today. I think we have been hearing about biodiversity, the agenda of biodiversity, for some time now. But I think it's gaining considerable relevance in the latest years, and that's why we are here talking about biodiversity today. I think this relevance comes for many reasons, and I would like to raise 3 of them that I think are very relevant. Probably we have more, right? But I think the first one is that the advances that we are having in the biodiversity negotiations, especially in the latest 2 COPs, COP15 and COP16, where we are envisioning and seeing the development of international regulatory scenario, the development of methodologies and frameworks, the attention to the topic of biodiversity. So I think what is happening in the COPs, in the COP15 especially and on COP16, is guiding a lot of the advances of this agenda. I would say the second reason is aligned with this movement, this international movement, is the development of methodology, the development of frameworks that is guiding us, that is helping us to understand how to address biodiversity. When you say everybody knows what is biodiversity, but when it comes to the practical point? How do I start work? How do I measure? What KPIs do I need to use? What kind of initiatives are allowed? I think is still a question mark. A lot of question marks on these topics. But I think we are developing, we are advancing. We already have internationally recognized frameworks today, and Regiane is going to talk with us a little bit about that. So I think we are having important advances on this area. And the third reason that is the most obvious one, but I think is the most important also, is the fact that I think we are reaching and understanding that we are living an intersecting crisis. Now that we need to address climate, we need to address ecological resilience together. They are linked. They are connected. And I think that's what the international community is looking now. That's where everybody's looking. You cannot solve the emergency of climate crisis without looking at biodiversity. And the opposite is the same, right? We cannot talk about climate without talking about land. We cannot talk about water without talking about biodiversity. So all this, we are talking about nature, right? So all these topics are related, and we need to look at these topics in an interconnected way. And I think this was the call, one of the calls, I would say, from COP16, right? Rodrigo, you were there. I think Regiane was there as well. I don't know, Anki, if you were there, but I think, yeah, you were there. So great on COP16. And the reinforcement on the idea that protecting ecosystem is foundational to building a climate resilience, right? That the COP, Biodiversity COP, and the Climate COP need to work together, need to reach an alignment, need to talk about financing that we are going to talk today. So I think we are not talking about biodiversity alone anymore, as we used to do. Although, everybody knows that it's connected, but I think we're not talking about biodiversity alone. We are talking now about nature and all the connections with these other elements. So today we are going to talk about what is the international scenario. What is the negotiations bringing, what is on the table, and how is this international scenario is being framed. We are going to talk about methodologies. We are going to talk about frameworks available. And you want to talk on how the private sector is demanded, is being called to respond to this topic, to respond to biodiversity, right? So I have here our specialists. And to start our discussion, I'm going to call Rodrigo. Rodrigo, I would like you to help us to set in the stage, right? So if you could walk us through on the main outcomes of, we know that COP15, we had a very important outcome that touches the private sector. So if you could talk a little bit on that, but mainly on the outcomes of COP16. So the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dulce, and thanks for the invitation of BCCC. And it's a pleasure to join you to this extremely lively and relevant debate. I think biodiversity became a hot topic at the multilateral agenda as climate change, especially from the COP15 decision on the Global Biodiversity Framework agreed in Montreal in 2022. That is the new set of targets for the Biodiversity Convention, with a specific target for the private sector involvement, engagement. Like it or not, the private sector it's using natural resources, and from a good point of view or a bad point of view, creating impacts or creating benefits. So they are connected, and when we talk about sustainable use of biodiversity at the CBD, we must bring the private sector to the table, because otherwise we will stay with the governments and conservation policies and so on, which is part of the whole objectives of the CBD, but not the total of the objectives. So the Global Biodiversity Framework, with this target 15 with the target 15, bringing the private sector to the center of the debate, created a new momentum at the CBD. And then we got to Cali COP16 as the first conference of the parties after the Global Biodiversity Framework approval in 2022. And it was really impressive to see the private sector participation at the COP. From a Brazilian point of view, there were plenty of companies there that have never been to a CBD COP, Biodiversity COP, which for me, it's a clear sign that, woke-up sign that, I'm involved on this, and I never realized, and now I am starting to think about this, because the finance sector starting to ask for reporting against biodiversity indicators and so on. So there was several companies there, but the participation is one important thing. When it comes to the decisions agreed on COP16, I would say that the COP partially was a successful conference, but not at all, because the biggest decision on finance was not adopted. And it's not good to start saying this, but I cannot simply forgot the decision on finance, because ultimately parties were supposed to agree how to put biodiversity finance on the ground. There's a huge debate about using the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, or to create a new fund. The developed countries want to keep GEF. Developing countries want to create a new financial mechanism. So there was no agreement, and we will have the COP was postponed to sometime and next year, and now we have the dates in February in Rome. It will take place the final meeting that will allow to close COP16 with the finance decision, and this is important, the decision on indicators to monitor compliance with the Global Biodiversity Framework. This is also extremely important. But we got a decision on synthetic biology. We got a decision on the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing, for the use of digital sequence information. There's a lot of things there that must be clarified, but it's a decision, and the Cali Fund was created, and the private sector that uses digital sequence will need to be involved, because ultimately they will pay benefit sharing, because they are generating innovation through the use of digital sequence information and so on. And this is a very relevant decision of COP16. There were the decision on climate change and biodiversity, recognizing the relationship, as Dulce mentioned at the beginning, of climate and biodiversity, and how to improve the adoption of climate and biodiversity actions that will ultimately generate benefits in both sides. And a lot of different decisions, minor decisions of the big puzzle that is the Convention on Biological Diversity as well. To close this part, this initial thought, I think the clear involvement of the private sector at the agenda, for me, was the most outstanding feature I brought to me from Cali. And then we need to advance with countries creating their targets. We are in the process to approve the national biodiversity targets here in Brazil, because this is how the private sector will be engaged into supporting or not supporting the implementation of the targets, that and the government will get this kind of information to the reports that we present in the future. But moreover, how the private sector will need to be engaged, like it or not, because the financial sector will ask for. And then there's the whole TNFD approach and framework and a lot of things that I think Regiane will add. So this is my initial thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I think you finished your initial thoughts with exactly what I was going to pick from your speech. Is I think you brought the importance and highlighted several times during your speech on the participation of the private sector and the interest of the private sector in this agenda, and the understanding of that it's relevant and they need to be there. They need to sit at the table. They need to understand where this discussion is going, right? And they are being demanded for information. It's affecting could affect in the market access to finance, and a number of other different implications that we know from the ESG agenda, right? So I'd like now to turn to Regiane. Regiane, I think I missed one point with Rodrigo, but I'd like you to address that now. That is, please introduce yourself, introduce your organization, and then my question to you is: let's focus on the private sector. What is target? Clarify to us what is target 15 and the role and the implications for the private sector. What are the frameworks? How the private sector are responding to that? What is on the table for the private sector, for the response of the private sector?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for BCC for the invitation. My name is Regiane Borsato. I'm talking on behalf of Life Institute, that it's a non-profit organization that has been working for 15 years now on the development of metrics, so ways to integrate biodiversity into business, how business can really measure and integrate this information in the high-level decision-making of the companies. And we've been on COP's, Biodiversity COP since 2010 in Japan. And I will share some slides with you because I think it's very important to highlight this information, starting with some historical approach on this engagement of business in this agenda before we start to discuss the challenges and advances of this last one COP we had in Cali. So just remembering that we have now 13 years of annual meetings of the Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity, the GPBB. That is a platform that was established by the convention in 2010. This decision comes from Japan, where the convention invited the parties to support this establishment. This global partnership puts together all the national and regional business and biodiversity initiatives. And the first meeting of GPBB occurred in 2011, and we are having these annual meetings. The last one was in Brazil, 2023. We had the annual meeting for the first time in Belém, Brazil. Just 1 year after the COP15 that Rodrigo mentioned, that was marked by the launch of the Global Biodiversity Framework on 2022. And we had another meeting, and we always have a lot of events of this platform. And we had a very important decision of this group in 2023 in Brazil, where the Mesoamerica group, the representatives of Mesoamerica, launched the PICP project, the Positive Incentives Collaborative Program. That is a kind of group that are putting together all the information related to business and positive financial incentives, the good examples of each country. So this work started in 2023 by this global partnership and was launched just in this last COP in Cali. And to remember that we have, I brought here some targets related to business. The most important one, I think, is target 15, but we have different other targets of the GBF that talks directly with business when we consider the reduction of the pollution, the promoting sustainable practices, mainly on the primary sector, together with agriculture sector, fisheries, forestry, and so on. The benefit sharing that Rodrigo just mentioned, the target 14 that aims to integrate biodiversity in decision-making at every level, from government to all kinds of sectors. The target 15 that Dulce just mentioned, and we will explain a little more, that ask business to measure, assess, disclose, and reduce risks and negative impacts. But also, this is very important, and Anke will talk about this, also business can measure and talk about the positive impacts. And we almost always forget that business can also have and there are very good examples of companies having positive impacts on biodiversity. And here we have also the target 16 that will talk about the promotion of sustainable consumption choices. And related to this, we bring the certification systems, and we have nowadays specific certification systems talking directly with biodiversity integration into business, and the financial targets that are related to financial targets that are the 18 and 19. And here we can also involve directly the business, mainly when we are talking about biodiversity credits. So this Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity, the GPBB, nowadays is comprised of 21 national and regional initiatives. Life Institute is member of this GPBB group through the Brazilian Initiative for Business and Biodiversity that was launched in 2012. And here I brought just two very good examples of the publications and work that has been done by this global platform. One of them is has been conducted by during the last years by the European Platform on Business and Biodiversity that comprises a lot of publications talking about the main metrics, measures, and certification systems that can be used by business and financial institutions to report biodiversity concretely. And here I have this last one that I just mentioned that was launched in Cali, that is the Positive Incentives, a key to progress, where they put together a lot of positive initiatives of each country that's helping business to accomplish the targets of GBF. And as Dulce commented, we have the target 15 talking directly about biodiversity performance. So I brought this slide specifically talking about Life Key. That's a system that Anke can explain a little bit how Boticário is using, but mainly we have here a platform where companies can put all the information of the business and can have different kind of reports to monitor both the negative and the positive impact. So the company can have a balance on the biodiversity performance. This is monitored each year, and it's a very practical way companies can report on how they are attending Target 15, monitoring the risks, positive and negative impact on biodiversity. And finally, to mention the biodiversity credits, because we could have another webinar just to talk about this, because it's a very new and complex subject to discuss, and very, very new because it was first mentioned by CDB decisions in Montreal in the launch of Global Biodiversity Framework, more specifically in Target 19, because it's a way that we can put together these financial commitments and transactions involving positive results on biodiversity. Remembering that the Target 18 talks about reducing harmful financial incentives and scaling up the positive incentives, and Target 19 talks specifically about mobilizing the $200 billion a year. And this is what Rodrigo mentioned that unfortunately was not, it didn't happen, and they will return to the discussions in February in Rome. But to say that Life is working in these biodiversity metrics for 15 years. So we are following these discussions and agenda on biodiversity credits. We really believe that it is a very new approach, and it will be very important for countries like Brazil, because we have a lot of natural and important natural resources. And here we have another coin, let's call, after the carbon market. We are following as a member of the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. So why this? I bought this definition because there are different definitions nowadays of what is a biodiversity credit, but we are using this definition of the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. That biodiversity credit is a certificate that represents a measured and evidence-based unit of positive biodiversity outcome, durable and additional to what would have otherwise occurred. So here is just one of several examples of credits. We have the Life Biodiversity credits, and we had the launch during the COP in Cali, the first project involving a subnational government and a bank, aiming at biodiversity credits transactions results finally on financial return for small producers. So small landowners can receive now this financial resource direct for this bank. And this is a project supported by the Paraná government. So it's one example of institutional arrangements that we can have involving producers in the agricultural sector and other primary sectors that are directly related to the positive biodiversity results, because there are a lot of companies and farmers that are contributing a lot to conserve these natural resources, and now we have this way to return monetarily to them for this conservation. So just to say that we has all these evolution of the business discussion. So if we say that we have now this specific agenda inside of the CDB, the global platform to discuss business, and we see companies being engaged with measuring. It's of course a small step, a very small step. But finally, from the point of view of Life Institute, for example, we can say that companies are starting to look at their negative impacts, to assume the responsibility, and considering to measure and to report, and is starting to adopt really a positive plan, because every company knows nowadays that they have to prove the positive balance on biodiversity to stay in this commercial international agenda, and society is demanding them for that, and they are starting. It's a very initial approach, but they are starting this movement. And some of you mentioned also about the TNFD. It's a very important approach. And so we also launched during the COP in Cali a manual that integrates life methodology with TNFD demands, so companies can use every step, every module, every information of these agenda, these metrics, and this software and these reports to answer the TNFD, the LEAP approach that talks about locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare the companies to really integrate biodiversity into their agendas. So it's this I had to bring to you, and I won't go any further, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Regiane. Thank you very much. You mentioned a couple of times measure, report, balance, positive balance, biodiversity impact. So, you know, and KPIs and frameworks. So I think all these related on how and what the private sector can approach biodiversity. So I'd like to invite Anke now. So Anke, please introduce yourself and your organization. And I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit of your experience, what kind of initiatives you have now for biodiversity, you know, that addresses biodiversity, but also how do you implement these initiatives? You know, would be a step-by-step, or where do companies can start looking and implementing biodiversity, the strategies or initiatives or activities in their strategy and daily basis? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dulce, and hi everyone. It's really nice to be here. It's a pleasure to speak to you here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I am Anke Manuela Salzmann. I am a forest engineer, and at Boticário Group Foundation, I'm a program manager working always to integrate business into, or better, biodiversity into business. And here I'm representing, actually I have two hats. So the first one is obviously of Boticário Group Foundation, but then I'm also representing Boticário Group. So Boticário Group Foundation is a corporate foundation maintained by Boticário Group, which is a Brazilian company crafting beauty since 1977. We have 3 industrial hubs in Brazil, and last year our revenue was $5.4 billion. So we are a quite big company in Brazil. And the owner, the founder of Boticário Group, always had this deep wish to promote nature conservation in Brazil. So his first idea was to plant 1 tree for each product going out of the industrial plant. So, and then he looked for some advice if he should do this, and then another forest engineer advised him and told him, you know, if you're gonna plant 1 tree for each of your products, at some point we won't have enough space in Brazil to plant trees. So, and then came the idea to establish the foundation, which was then created in 1990. This was even before the Rio 92. So this was quite innovative for that time, because we were not actually discussing the environmental agenda was not really being well discussed at the global level and not at the national level if we are talking about Brazil. So next year we'll be then celebrating our 35th anniversary, and so 35 years promoting nature conservation in Brazil. Throughout our history, we have supported over 1,800 conservation solutions, and here I mean nature conservation projects that are being carried out by other organizations on the ground, but also impact businesses. So here I'm talking about creation and strengthening, acceleration of businesses that promote positive impact for biodiversity conservation and also at the social level. So we have also supported a lot of research projects throughout our history. And through these projects, we discovered 178 species of fauna and flora in Brazil. So this is something that makes us really, really proud to also contribute to science in Brazil. And we also own 2 private protected areas, which in total are protecting 11,000 hectares. One is located in the Brazilian savanna, in the Cerrado, and the other one in the Atlantic forest. So mainly the 2 most threatened ecosystems that we have in Brazil. We know that climate change is a reality. Climate change is not choosing anymore whom to affect. So if it's the global south or the global north, so everybody is really feeling the effects of climate change. And for Boticário Group Foundation, it's quite clear that adaptation is the only way forward. And within this process, nature has a major role. And here, I'm talking about nature-based solutions, so which is mainly using natural processes and ecosystems to tackle the most pressing challenges that we have at our times. And it's important to say that at the end of the day, if you're working with nature-based solutions, you always have to have gains for biodiversity and also in terms of social being. So improvement of livelihoods, for example. So within this context, Boticário Group Foundation started from this year on until 2030 to focus on climate change adaptation. And within this focus, we have 2 strategic pillars. So one is to promote freshwater security in strategic Brazilian watersheds, and the other one is to enhance coastal marine resilience in strategic Brazilian regions. And as I told you, nature-based solutions is our main process here. So it's the main way we use to promote the water security and this coastal marine resilience. But now I would like to tell you a little bit how we also got to this pillar of water security at the foundation, because this is what is really connecting us with Boticário Group. So in 2018, Boticário Group came to us and they told us, please guys, help us to develop a water strategy. And we thought, okay, let's start with our industrial hub located in southern Brazil, which is also closer to the foundation's headquarters. We are located and based in Curitiba in southern Brazil. And our industrial hub is in the neighboring municipality in São José dos Pinhais. So we started looking at our industrial hub in southern Brazil and starting to understand from, which is the watershed that is supplying water to our plant, and what are the problems within this watershed, the opportunities, how can we develop a water strategy considering also the environment which is going outside our fences. And then we realized, based on, at the time we were getting deeper and deeper into all the study of the watershed and all the aspects, the different aspects connected to this watershed, we realized that it's really important, it's really, here the way was to really develop a strategy that is transforming the dependence on natural capital into positive impact at both socioeconomic and environmental levels. So to really see our dependence on water as an opportunity to make the difference on the ground. And then we also, during these studies, we tried to came up to some monetary values, for example, and we calculated with the sustainability team of the group, how much would it cost or how much would we lose in terms of revenue if we would have to shut down our operations due to 1 day without water. And we came to numbers that were really impressive at the time, and which also helped us to engage the business itself. So in 2019, we launched then a initiative that we call Viva Agua initiative, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative working to promote water security and climate change adaptation in strategic watersheds in Brazil. So we started at the Miringuava watershed, which is the watershed in southern Brazil, supplying our industrial plant. In 2021, we went to Guanabara Bay in Rio de Janeiro, and from next year on, we'll expand to 4 other regions in Brazil. So, so Viva Agua was in fact a really nice initiative to open the eyes of our business that it's really necessary to look on how you depend on natural capital, and that it's not enough just working with improvements of eco-efficiency levels. You really have to work with that, but at the same time, you have to look outside your fences and understand from where the natural capital is coming from and what you can do to continue depending on this natural capital, because for some components, there won't be replacements. You have to, the only way is continue depending on these components. So to really transform it into an opportunity to make a difference throughout an ESG strategy. So in 2021, Boticário Group launched 16 sustainability targets to be met by 2030. And one of these targets was really looking at the most critical natural capital components for the business itself, and how do we use nature conservation to promote the conservation of this natural capital. But then we had COP15, where Regiane and also Rodrigo explained already. We had a very important milestone at COP15 with the target 15. So with the target 15, companies are now encouraged to measure, to understand the risks, to measure their impacts and to monitor their impacts, and also to think how do they respond to all those impacts on biodiversity. So we really started thinking within these sustainability target, looking at the natural capital. So what are really, beside of water, what are other natural capital components important to our business? Is there any way to replace some of these components or not? And if not, what is going to be the strategy to continue depending on those components in a sustainable way? And then based on these questions that we were asking ourselves, and then the target 15 from which was launched within the Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15, we decided in 2023 to reshape these specifically sustainability target, looking at natural capital, and we thought, okay, let's make it broader. Let's look at biodiversity as a whole, and so that we can also bring the target 15 into our strategy and start working towards meeting target 15, at least from Boticário's side. So and then it's also very interesting because this target is essential for the private sector, and we started looking a little bit and we understood that there is a really nice study that says that of the 500 Fortune companies, less than 5% have set targets to reduce biodiversity loss. And here I say that looking at biodiversity, it's a very it has to be a very selfish view. You know, we are not really looking at biodiversity because it's beautiful, because we love it, of course. I mean, at the Boticário Foundation, we are looking in that way. But as a business, you have to look at biodiversity as something that you really need to continue existing with your business in the long term. So you need biodiversity to operate. So there is a study from the World Economic Forum saying that 50% of our global GDP is generated by companies that depend on biodiversity or the services that biodiversity provides us. So we need biodiversity to survive in all the terms, the economical terms, our health. So that's why I always say that as a business, we have to look at biodiversity in a very selfish way in order to say, okay, I want to guarantee my business in the long term. So it's really important to maintain the resources, and what can I do outside my fences to keep the resources, all the resources coming to me. Yeah, so today, our biodiversity target, we aim through this target to strategically transform our dependence and impact on natural capital into gains for biodiversity conservation and ecosystem services provision. And as I said, these will then provide also the business's longevity. Regiane told a little bit about the TNFD, the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures. So this is a guideline that we have adopted within Boticário Group as well to map our risks and to understand our impacts on biodiversity. But Regiane also mentioned that LIFE methodology is a methodology that was recognized by TNFD that can be used within the TNFD process to really understand and measure our impacts on biodiversity, and also understand what are the actions that we can do in terms of nature conservation to answer to in response to these impacts. And so we adopted LIFE methodology through LIFE certification to understand our impacts, and also to understand in terms of nature conservation actions what we are doing, if it's already enough to respond to our impact, and if not, what can we do additionally. And at some points, depending on the operation that is being certified, we even have we have more actions than needed that LIFE certification requires to receive the certification. So we are slowly, step by step, also walking towards a net positive impact. But here, of course, the idea is first to look to all our operational sites, to come then to a 0 to 0 in terms of impact. I mean, there is no way to compensate our impact. Once we have impacted, the impact is already done. But I mean, we can somehow we can do something in terms of nature conservation to respond to this impact. And once we get there, like to 0 to 0, to a neutral impact, let's say, we can then continue walking towards a net positive impact. Yeah, so and LifeKey, the software that Regiane also mentioned, is a really nice software. It's really nice to use because it shows you in a very easy way what are your impacts and So it makes it really visual, you know, and this helps us as businesses to better understand, to better comprehend our impacts. And it also shows that how your conservation actions are responding to this impact, and in the end, what is the final balance of impacts and actions that you are performing as a business in terms of nature conservation. And then about COP16 was for us really a really nice experience. Was the first time, I mean, Boticário Group is being part already of biodiversity COPs as a business, but this time we really managed to bring people from our ESG team, so it was really valuable. It also was a really nice forum to change experiences, to talk a little bit about our experience, and to exchange ideas, and really to motivate other businesses to come on board with us and to work together towards nature conservation. And as Rodrigo said, this COP was really emblematic in terms of private sector participation. So only from Brazil, we had the delegation of the Brazilian Corporate Council for Sustainable Development. They brought 42 companies from 17 different sectors. So this is quite impressive if we are talking about biodiversity. So I know we still need to get to a consensus in terms of some decisions at COP16, so it's not finished yet. But in terms of all the discussions that were going on, involving different stakeholders and the possibility of exchange the ideas and to learn from others, was really valuable for us as Boticário Foundation, and also as Boticário Group Foundation, as Boticário Group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anki. Thank you very much for guiding us through this visionary journey of Boticário, right? And it's amazing. It's amazing to hear that we started in 1977. And I am from Curitiba, so I remember I was a kid and used to hear about all the nature, the initiatives, the conservation initiatives that Boticário used to had, and we had to grow up to understand the value of that, right? So it's amazing. It's amazing. Congratulations. So I'd like to continue on with you and Regiane. So I think I have two questions. The first one that you can answer, or Regiane, is at what point, when is the right moment for the company to look for a framework, for a tool? Do I need to have a strategy first? Do I need to understand what is biodiversity for me? Do I need to have initiatives? And then I look for the Instituto Life tool, and then start measuring. I start looking for KPIs and measuring and monitor and reporting it. So at which stage of the development, the strategic development in a company, should I look at these frameworks, right? And the second question I have, Regiane, is if you can just give us a glance, how is the biodiversity credit market in Brazil? I'm asking because we get a lot of questions for companies, from clients, from Proactiva, saying, is that a real market? If I have a biodiversity credit, is that tradable? How much, what is the value of the biodiversity credit? So if you can just give us, enlighten us on how is this market in Brazil.
Okay. Thank you, Lucy, for the questions. About the first one, when companies usually start to use the methodology and approach and relating to their strategy, Fortunately, we are seeing that even very small business and even the very first stages of these strategies, companies now want to measure. I think this is a very, very important change we had the last year, because if we think about the last 2 decades, for example, when we started with the ISO 14 and other approaches that look only inside the company, and at a time where companies only wanted to talk about the positive performance and the good things they were doing, very differently now. I think this is a very important change we're having nowadays. Companies are accepting to look to the negative impacts, and they are it's not being a problem anymore, because now they know that they are most more recognized because they are looking into it than about only being positive. So it's a very important step. I think society is recognizing the importance of the companies that look at the negative impact. So we are seeing a movement where companies, as I said, even the small ones, are using these initiatives, these approaches, these measurements, these metrics, these initiatives to look inside the business, to understand the negative impacts, and then to build a strategy from this point. So they are much more important strategies because they are built on real impacts that are being recognized. Because before we had a lot of companies putting money in projects that were nonsense, like as any investment would result in biodiversity conservation. And now they are understanding that first you have to look to the impacts, to the risks, as I said, even from a selfish way, because this is what will be, and recognizing it. So from this point of recognition of my impacts, my risks, then I will build a strategic plan. So they are starting to use these approaches in a very first phase, and it happened. It was not this way that it used to happen before. And about the credits, it's everyone is asking these questions. We also have a lot of questions because it's very interesting from our point of view, because as I said, life started developing metrics 15 years ago. 15 years ago was like 13 years before the mention of the credits in the global agenda. But we use it to develop these metrics. Like, no, we have 2 main metrics, that is the biodiversity pressure index and the biodiversity positive performance. So combining these 2 metrics, we have the biodiversity performance, and discounting all the negative part, the company or the farmer can have a positive amount of credits that can be traded in the market. But this is very new for us. We launched the rules. I just put the website because we have all the rules of these credits and all the methodology available. And we launched the rules for credits using life metrics in August 2023. Okay, and about the market, what can I say? I can talk about some examples that are happening. So I first mentioned this example of the Paraná government with a bank, that is the Regional Development Bank, BRDE, where the government is financing the producers so they have cost zero to implement all the process and to have the farms audited. And the bank is assuming the commitment of buying 100% of the credits generated in the first 2 years by these small producers. The rules are to be launched this year, but the project were launched in Cali, but now they are finishing the rules that will select these 25 farmers in Paraná government, for Paraná state. And we have some other examples of some NGOs, for example, that have some big natural reserves and that asked for the audit, remembering that Life Institute cannot do any audit process. We are the standardizing body, and they are some certifying bodies accredited in the market to do the audits. And now the first natural reserves started to ask for the certifying bodies to be audited and to put this information in the market. So we are not aware about any value yet, because these are being negotiated between the parts involved in the transactions. Okay.
Thank you, Regiane. I'd like now to go back to Rodrigo. Rodrigo, you mentioned in your initial remarks, the sequencing information. Now the decision on the sequencing information. So can you tell us a little bit more, what is it, and how it can impact or is impacting already the private sector?
For sure, Dulce. This is the DSI mechanism. That DSI means digital sequence information, relates to genetic resources that are that have their genome sequenced, and we have digital information about the genetic. No, it's not the molecules. It's missing the word in English. The digital sequences, guanine, thymine, that forms the DNA. And this is about innovation. This is about how companies do research and innovation using those information from genetic resources that are nowadays sequenced in a cloud, in a computer software, and so on. I don't need to get the genetic resource, get to the lab to do a research. I got information and I will do my research. Combining different sequences, combining sequences with genetic resources. And this is how evolution it's going, from the pharmaceutical companies to the cosmetic companies to biotech companies, chemical, and so on. So the mechanism was established in Montreal, but then the negotiations evolved to be able to define who will be in the scope, and we must pay benefit sharing, and how to calculate this benefit sharing. And so the sectors that most use genetic resources, like pharma, like biotech, like services associated to the digital sequence information, today there are companies that their business is to provide a service using genetics sequence information for companies that will use this service on their innovation processes and so on. So what was agreed is that all those sectors / companies will need to pay benefit sharing. And now there's an allocation formula that was agreed, and this must be evolved in the next 2 years. Some studies will need to be done, and in the near future we will get to a moment where companies will pay because they use genetic resources in their processes and innovations, and you don't need to have 100% of your products relying on those sequences. But if you are a company and you will be mandatorily, you will need to pay. So I think the decision it's something big in terms of how everyone we need to pay attention to this, and we need to consider this in their balances, because if you consider the total revenue or the profit from the products that are using genetic resources, digital sequence information, this has a totally different impact in terms of how much a company will need to pay. And so it's something new for everyone, and so it's a big issue on the table for sure. And just to get what take advantage of Regiane and Anke's talking about the whole integration of the private sector. My first CBD COP was in Curitiba in 2006, and everything changed at that time, and not that at that time, but since let's say before the launch of the Global Biodiversity Framework negotiations, before pandemic, and then extending the negotiations up to 2022 when the new targets were agreed. Some companies were looking to the biodiversity agenda, but just a few. It was not an agenda for business like climate change became, and today it is. So it's a completely different moment, and again, it's very interesting to have the possibility to talk and to share views on this on an event such like this.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I will start now to get some questions from our audience, and I think I have one for you, Anke. One question. When you look at all the carbon projects, or the projects that address climate change and biodiversity, you always think they are enormous. If you need if you want to do a conservation project, needs to be in a great a size of land, a piece of land cannot be so it seems we always have in mind that these projects need to be big, big projects to have a positive impact. So I think the question I have, and the question that we have here, from the audience, is how small and medium enterprises also take actions towards sustainability, becoming part of this global agenda led by multinational large corporations. How can they, start acting? How they can be part of the solutions?
First, thank you for the question. Here, I would go back again on understanding first, how do you connect as a business to biodiversity? Because throughout my career of working with business and biodiversity, often companies told me, I don't have anything to do with biodiversity. This is something that doesn't really connect to my business. But then you start asking some questions, and in the end, the person talking to you realizes, okay, I have everything to do with biodiversity. And so first, it has to, the business, independent if it's small, medium, or big, has to understand the connection. So where is the connection? Where is my connection as a business to biodiversity? Because then any action departing from this understanding becomes much more easier, and because then suddenly the business realize, okay, I'm doing this, or I have to do this because it's gonna bring me this positive impact at the end of the day, what is really nice when we talk about biodiversity is biodiversity, there are no geographical limits, you know? So, and it gives you the chance and the opportunity to work really in a multi-stakeholder approach, because addressing biodiversity loss, climate change, and all these huge challenges that we have, they are huge, they are giant, and it's not, we as a company, a big, a small, or a medium company, we won't never be able to address all those challenges by ourselves. So it's a huge opportunity that we have to really work together towards a goal that is a goal of everybody. So and then, for example, initiatives as the initiative that I brought, the Viva Agua initiative, is providing these opportunity to companies, because many companies, they tell us, okay, we don't have any ESG strategy, we don't even have an ESG department at the company, we are still working on that. So how do we connect with nature conservation projects? And then Viva Agua can be a really nice platform to connect the businesses to an ESG strategy, to nature conservation projects. On the other hand, it reminds me again of life certification. So within the context of life, the business can be also connected to nature conservation organizations that are doing a great job already. So sometimes it's not about you doing something, but you providing the means to others to do it on the ground. So I think in the end, it's all about working together, and first of all, understanding how do you depend on nature, and that really your business can, that you really need nature to have your business running in the long term. Because it was really crazy when I told you, for example, we calculated how much we would, our revenue would go down if we would have to shut down our company due to one day without water. And we also calculated the expenses we would have if we would need to buy water from water trucks, for example. And we thought in 2018, we thought, okay, this is gonna happen in a 10 years time, you know? And 2020 and 2021, we were going through the toughest water crisis here in southern Brazil. And we were buying water from water trucks, and we almost had to shut down our operations due to water lag. So it was crazy. So we had like over 600 days in our city here and the neighboring cities where we were going through a rationing system, a water rationing system, and where we had 36 hours water and 36 hours no water. So it was really tough. So and this shows us that we depend on water, we depend on all the resources that biodiversity provides us, and without these resources, nothing is gonna happen, and our economy won't move forward as well.
Very good. So partnerships, cooperations, right? Very good. So I have another question here, I think, Rodrigo. So how do you see the role of Brazil and Canada, you know, individually or combined, to foment biodiversity-driven initiatives? And I think this comes also to a question that I had here, is how about the country targets that you mentioned in your initial remarks? You know, I was going to ask about, you know, Brazil, how Brazil is positioning themselves, you know, regarding the Brazil's country targets on biodiversity.
Thanks, Lucy. This is very interesting. You know, the first thing that comes to most of the people's minds when it comes to talk about biodiversity is it's nature-based solutions. It's conserving native vegetation or from another perspective, avoiding deforestation, because if you got deforestation, you have a biodiversity loss, very explicit, and you have a carbon emission because deforestation, and this is very easy to see and to understand. But come on, much beyond conserving native vegetation or doing restoration, that is another very important target, and a target that combines climate and biodiversity as well. There are different issues that are on the 23 targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So, but what does this mean? It depends, because if you are a company that you are using natural resources to produce, right? You are exploring natural resources. Then there's water. Then there's the species that you will find on the area of your company or your upstream and downstream chain. Do you have a monitoring? Does your company knows the species you can find? Is there any threatened species that you can find there? What do you do to help avoiding extinction? What do you do to help conserving those species? This is another extremely relevant subject. What do you do when it comes to genetic resources, and then the digital sequencing of those genetic resources in some cases, because you can do sequences and you can explore this in the near future, and you can discover new remedies, new cosmetics, and new products, because that you don't know yet, but your business that is not related to digital sequence information must must discover new products because you started to work with these genetic resources. So this will become a very important target 13, for example, for you as well. And I'm bringing those examples because it allows the different sectors to see themselves within the agenda, within the targets. And what is, for example, thinking about Brazil, Canada, what is the participation of agriculture and mining, that are two important sectors for Brazil and Canada, when it comes to biodiversity? It's from a Brazilian perspective, it's only tackling deforestation, and deforestation is the biggest problem, and that's the only target? No, there's several targets of the GBF associated with doing agriculture in Brazil, in Canada, whatever place in the world. How to, come on, I need to understand this. How can a company that it's connected to the agriculture value chain, depending on where you are in the value chain, you have some impacts, and how you should work to be able to first understand how you are connected, and then try to mitigate and try to create positive benefits and so on. From mining is the same question. And why integrating the sectors? Because the sectors must respond, must give answers, must contribute to the agenda, because the sectors, they will continue to exist and they are important. So this is one thing that I think it's extremely relevant. The sectors must first understand how they are connected. Anki give an amazing lesson to us, and just not to forget, because when Dulce started to talk after you said about all the Boticário history and involvement with the agenda, when I was 14 years old or something, I remember going to the first Boticário store that opened in Ponta Grossa, the city Regiane, and I was born. to buy gifts for my mom, together with me and my brother and my father, the first Boticaria store in Ponta Grossa. It's very interesting to remember this because there's a long time ago, and how a company that are producing perfumes and makeups and different beauty products, it's involved. Yes, it is from several potential points of entry. So the company must understand where I am, what I do, how I'm connected or not connected. There's the whole connection with local communities and indigenous people, for example, that in some cases are extremely important. For the other cases, it might not be. But then there's another target here that embraces your business, and you must open your mind and start to see this, because this is at the agenda, and the banks and investors will ask you to do that, like it or not. So you must look to this. And I think it's extremely important from a broad ESG perspective. It is a hot topic, yes, and you must be aware of it.
Perfect. Thank you, Rodrigo. I think we are coming to an end, but I have one more question here, I think for you, Regiane. And the question is, let's see if I understood it correctly, okay? So if the current frameworks on biodiversity, you know, the current systems or methodologies and frameworks that we have been adopting for business, if they contemplate also carbon collection, or, you know, that could also result in carbon credits. So are you looking only on biodiversity, or that could also be aligned, or could be, you know, look at in conjunction to look at carbon credits? I hope I'm right, you know, I'm interpreting your question right.
I think so, Dulce, thank you. The question is that partially because, as I mentioned, one of the metrics is the BPI, the Biodiversity Pressure Index. And for this calculation, we consider 5 environmental aspects that companies has to answer each year, and one of them is GHG emissions. So yes, we consider the emissions, the carbon emissions, to calculate the biodiversity pressure of a company. But when our calculations, we consider that we are talking only about biodiversity. So it's is one of the aspects that contributes with the biodiversity pressure, but we don't mix, for example, biodiversity credit with a carbon credit. So when we talk about biodiversity credits, we are only talking about biodiversity credits, like we had 2 accounts, one in reais and another in euro or dollar. So we don't mix the calculations of carbon credits and biodiversity credits. Although we know that some carbon initiatives consider biodiversity result as a plus, but it's a plus on the carbon credits, understand? It's a carbon credit with a plus in biodiversity, but continues being a carbon credit. We don't mix the coins, let's say, the units of each metric.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Regiane. We still have a couple of minutes, right, Khalil? So I'd like to ask you, we talked a lot about challenges, about opportunities as well, but I'd like you to give a final remarks on what to expect for this agenda. What is coming for next year? What is coming for the next 5 years? So what we can expect? Just a brief remarks.
Now I can start. I think we can expect each year more and more companies engage in this agenda. If any company had some doubt that the biodiversity agenda would be an important issue for the markets. I think, as Rodrigo said, that's no doubt anymore. It's completely different what biodiversity means for business nowadays than it used to meant before. And we launched in 2022 in Montreal, the Life Coalition for Business and Biodiversity. That's a group that puts a group of companies together just to discuss biodiversity as a business. And I think it's no way so we return to the point that we had before. Companies are really understanding that biodiversity is part of the business. So this is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Regiane.
Yeah, I would add on Regiane's point of private sector engaging more and more into the biodiversity agenda. And also, Rodrigo mentioned at the beginning of his speech that one important decision wasn't made at this COP, which is regarding to the financial mechanism, which is crucial. But I think like at Boticário Group Foundation, we established some financial mechanisms, and for some of them, it took us 1 year of discussion, of internal discussion. And then when it comes to a global mechanism, a global fund for biodiversity, I know that the discussion is much more complex, especially when we have all the countries involved in the negotiation process, and we know that there are different political interests involved as well, which unfortunately are not always favoring biodiversity conservation. But despite of that, I would encourage all of us to continue working, because if I think of Boticário Group, for example, the projects that we have in mind, that we plan, they will happen with or without the fund, the Global Biodiversity Fund. So, and at COP16, I had the opportunity to see so many great initiatives going on. And I really came back really energized, you know. I said like, okay, we didn't finish COP. There were plenty of very, very important decisions that weren't made yet, but still, like, we are doing so much on the ground. So let's just continue doing it and make the difference that we need.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Yeah, taking advantage of Anke's point. One of the key problems with the finance negotiation beyond the definition of the JEF or a new fund is from where money will come. What are the sources of money? If we look to the climate decision on finance, the new climate finance decision, it is written there, money will come from multiple sources, bilateral, multilateral, public and private. And what does this mean? And at the biodiversity text was something like that as well. So it will come from Anke's company. It will come from a group of investors. It will come from a governmental policy, a state policy, like Regiane mentioned, that will combine with a bank to pay for biodiversity credits, despite this is totally different from a carbon market. But we are starting. Things already started. And when it comes to finance, companies that are creating impacts and contributing positively towards biodiversity targets are involved into biodiversity actions. The name of climate actions or biodiversity action. What does this mean? Several potential things depending who you are, what you do, what is your business. So climate finance and biodiversity finance means different sources of money, different types of projects. And the private sector is involved on this because they are using natural resources, and they must. I used to say that they must start to talk the biodiversity language, because it's out there, and you cannot hide from the agenda.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I think, Khalil, we are on time, just on time, right? So I'll thank you, Anki, Regiane, Rodrigo, for this great discussion. Thank you very much for being here with us today. And now Khalil is with you.
Lucy, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the panelists that accepted. I think my main lesson here is that we need collaboration between everyone, and that everyone is involved, and we need to take actions now. So this is some of the really important discussions that we are having, and the BCCC is committed to bring more and more this discussion and to connect all the stakeholders so we can take actions to promote a sustainable agenda. I'd like to thank everyone again for watching this event, our guests, our sponsors, partners, members, and just know that this is one of the many initiatives that the BCCC organized to connect with companies and people from Brazil and Canada. Make sure to follow us online and to review our opportunities to collaborate. Thank you once again, and count on BCCC to expand your network in Brazil and Canada. Thank you, everyone.